Hello, hello, everyone. Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? Tuesday, Wednesday? Tuesday. Oh, it's Tuesday somewhere. I think it's Tuesday here. Happy day, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. We're excited to have this conversation. My name is Shalimar Gonzales, and I serve as the CEO of Solid Ground. And I will have the pleasure not only of sitting in the esteemed company of these folks, but also giving you a little bit more information about what you have signed up for, RSVP for, which maybe a friend brought you. Maybe you're coming because you're going to grab dinner beforehand, and hopefully when you walk out of here, you're going to learn something new and tell all your friends about the amazing work that is happening in these organizations. So this is a series. So this is a series that we called our Social Justice Salons at Solid Ground. And we started these last year, and this was really an opportunity as an organization, for us to highlight the work that we do as an anti-poverty organization. So our social justice salons have been around food stability and food equity and food justice work. We've done social justice salons about affordable housing and housing practices. We might be talking about that later today, we'll see. And then we also have done social justice salons on homelessness in our region, both in the city of Seattle as well as in King County and then nationally. And so these are just opportunities for us to have really unique and deeper conversations about things that probably most of us read about in the news. For those of us on this panel, these are things that we deal with every single day as part of our work. And today, our conversation is going to be about being the leaders of these organizations that are running 24/7 and what that is like, and how you all can tap in to help support some of our work. So we're excited to have these conversations. We have some really amazing sponsors that have helped us to produce these. And so I want to thank Northwest Plant Services for their sponsorship, as well as Windermere Cohort for their support of our work as well. So again, Northwest Plant Services and Cohort Windermere for their support of our social justice salons. All right. Let's talk about some logistics really quick. Restrooms, if you don't know it really quick, around this corner, and then just over to your left or to your right. And so feel free to take care of business as you need. And then we have snacks and those sorts of things over there. So please take care of yourself throughout our time together. And again, we're going to have a really deep and interesting conversation today. All right, are y'all ready to get introduced? I'm ready to introduce y'all.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so I have something printed, because I want to make sure that I give these ladies their flowers, because they are fantastic, and I don't want to forget any of the impact that they have had in our community and will continue to have. So I'm going to start first with Andrea Caupain Sanderson. Andrea is the CEO of Byrd Barr Place. Andrea has worked to promote economic mobility and Black liberation across Washington State for more than 2 decades. As Byrd Barr Place's CEO since 2008, so you can do the math there, she led the organization in its efforts to build an equitable Washington through innovative programs, services that nurture people's health and well-being. Thank you, Andrea. Janice Deguchi. Raise your hand, Janice. So everyone, there we go. Janice is the executive director of Neighborhood House, and Janice has served in that role since September of 2019. Janice is a Seattle native with over 25 years of experience helping people across vocational training, early learning, which I know a lot of Janice is working in the early learning field, senior care, and youth mentorship. Janice is on the boards of 501 Commons, shout out 501 Commons, and the Washington State Community Action Partnership. Shout out Jeff, who's in the audience, who leads that organization, and she co-chairs the Seattle Human Services Coalition for Wage Equity Leadership Committee. And we all believe that wage equity is very important. So thank you, Janice, for all your work. We got a legend on stage, Estela Ortega. So Estela serves as executive director of El Centro de la Raza. Estela is one of its founders and has been with that agency since 2009. And has been their ED since 2009. Estela's actually been working with El Centro and at El Centro for over 50 years. I feel like I should just say period, because there's a lot of knowledge and mentorship and guidance that you have done, both for the staff that have come through El Centro as well as participants and community members. So El Centro, and through Estela's leadership, has really been engaging in civic action work throughout community empowerment. Estela has, and this is a direct quote, unwavering commitment to the work, and has earned national recognition for Education Association, as well as the Northwest Progressive Institute. And in 2020, I can't leave this off, was named one of Seattle Times' 13 most influential people of the decade. TraeAnna. TraeAnna Holiday is our moderator. TraeAnna does a lot of different things, but I'm going to stick to the bio so I don't get in trouble. So Trae is a Seattleite with a passion for telling her neighborhood stories through film and media. She found a home for this work at Converge Media as an Emmy-winning, let me say that again, Emmy Award-winning TV show host, producer, and media personality. Trae is also the Deputy Chief of Staff of Communications for Washington State's Office of Equity. Shout out to our equity people in the room tonight, bringing equity and belonging through the lens of communications to the entire state. So thank you, Trae. And I'm Shalimar Gonzales for Solid Ground.
Thank you. Let's give it up to Shalimar for those amazing introductions, right? Well, I'm going to make one note here. At the end of this panel, y'all will have an opportunity to ask questions of the panelists here. And so we do have someone who will come around with a microphone. That you, Anna? Anna got you. So if you do have a question, just wait to ask it until she's there with a mic. We want to make sure we capture all of this amazing audio tonight. So thank you for your participation in advance. We are here because obviously the work that all of these amazing women have been doing is something we want to be able to share. And I really want to start with backgrounds. We all have a reason for why we pursue this kind of work. It's not really something we fall into. It's something that is oftentimes intentionally a choice we make. So I'll start with you, Shalimar. What got you into social justice work?
That's a great question. So my pathway into social justice work has really been embedded in who I am and how I've been raised growing up. So unlike some of these folks here, I'm a San Francisco native, and my family has been and continues to be very active in the social justice movements in the Bay Area, including the Black Panthers movement. And so it was just something that I was born and raised into. It was an expectation that this is the type of work that I would do. When my mom tells people what I do for a job, she usually says two things. She fundraises, and she tries to make the world a better place. And that is always what I've tried to do. I've always been a nonprofit professional in my career, and that's been my choice because that's my passion. And this work is something that fuels me. It also makes me exhausted. Let's be clear. I also get very tired as well because it's unrelenting and it never stops. But that unrelentingness is the thing that allows me to continue to move forward in a way that I feel like is how I want to be in the world. I can't imagine not being and doing social justice work. Like I said, it's deeply embedded in my core of who I am. So it was natural for me to step into a role like Solid Ground, where I could do it as my day-to-day, and then on the weekends, I can do other things that are activist related as well. So.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. Thank you for that. Janice, tell us more about your background. What got you into this work?
Thank you, TraeAnna. So like I said in my bio, I was born and raised in Seattle, and I am a third-generation Japanese American. So my parents were born in the United States, and my grandparents were immigrants from Japan. And I am of the generation where my parents were incarcerated during World War II. My mom was incarcerated in Tule Lake, California, and my dad was incarcerated in Minidoka, Idaho. And my mom graduated from graduated from high school in camp. And just part of that growing lived experience, and we didn't really talk about that. That really wasn't talked about. And so I think the first time I learned about it was in college, like really learned about it, like really understood. Like I knew my parents were in camp, but I didn't really understand all that there was that was going on. And then after I graduated from college, I joined the Japanese American Citizens League, which is a civil rights organization. It's been around for a pretty long time. And that was the group that successfully advocated for redress, for reparations for Japanese Americans, and that started in Seattle with the chapter that I joined in. And so as a 23-year-old college graduate, I got to meet some of the legends of this activism in my community, and they really inspired me. And even though the fight for reparations was completed by the time I joined, there was still a lot more work to do, and we were able to get some money to do public education so it wouldn't happen again. And so because it's all volunteer, I was able to do stuff that I wouldn't be able to do, like no one would pay you to do this stuff. It's volunteer work, and so I was able to lead a project to create public art in the Pike Place Market to tell the story of the Japanese farmers, which my mom was. My mom, my grandfather were Japanese farmers that sold produce in the market before the war. And so I was able to cut my teeth in a safe place. I could screw up. No one was paying me. I didn't have a boss. But I did have these elder civil rights advocates. You probably, have maybe heard of like Al Sugiyama and Kip Tokuda and Terry Kinoshita and Ken Nakano and Chuck Cotton. A lot of people that you probably don't know, but are really pivotal to the movement around civil rights. And then we continue to advocate for people that are incarcerated in immigration detention and things like that now too. And when 9/11 hit, just continue to advocate and use our experience to advocate for other communities that are being impacted by racism and prejudice and fear.
Wow. These amazing backgrounds. Thank you. Miss Andrea, tell us, your background starting from the beginning. Give us a little snap.
Thank you. So I was born in British Guyana, South America, small Caribbean nation, and I immigrated here with my family at the age of 12. But before we moved here, I was raised with my grandmother, and it was this journey of watching her, unbeknownst to me, modeling for me this idea around being a public servant and really giving your life in service to other people who were less fortunate than you. So I watched my grandmother do for those less fortunate than us. She worked with an organization called the Associated Country Women of the World, where she traveled globally supporting women in poor nations to become self-sufficient. She was doing it in a time where women's lib was not the thing to talk about in those poor nations. So I also watched her step into her courage, but also this conviction about I have to do for those who I feel are less fortunate than me. So when I moved here, I went to Kent Junior High in Kent. I went to Kent Meridian High School, so I'm a Royal. I went to the Evergreen State College, so gooey duck. Right. And I studied political economy because I wanted to understand from a policy perspective, how do you support people, again, who are less fortunate or who are less connected to the system in that way? That led me to the state legislature, where I was mentored by Kip Tokuda, by the way, may he rest in peace. I started out as an intern in the Senate, then I worked as a legislative aide in the House, then I went on to the governor's office under Governor Locke's administration for 5 years, where I really got sort of my feet wet in policy work, but as it related to Black Washingtonians, which was exciting for me. I was working for the commission, Washington State Commission on African American Affairs. So I got to travel around the state, learning about these different Black communities across the state, but also our collective challenges as a people not just folks in King County, but Pierce and Snohomish and Kitsap and Whatcom. Yes, black folks live out there too. And we had our unique challenges, but we had a lot of similarities. And at that point, I'd been there 5 years, and I'd had enough of understanding from a policy perspective how that construct impacted people who were less fortunate, and really wanted to be on the ground to understand and support implementation of policy. And that's what brought me to Byrd Barr Place.
Wow, wow, these are great to hear all of this. Mrs. Estela, I mean, 50 years, you got to take us all the way back. Let us know what got you into this work.
Well, it's life circumstances. I'm originally from Texas, a little town right outside of Houston, and that little town had a population of 300 people, and I lived in the country of the 300 people. So pretty isolated. In that is, I grew up extremely poor, very, very poor. Sometimes I will say embarrassingly poor, just because of our house, food issues, clothing. And so this work is very personal because I know what that feels like and how people look at you and make you feel less than because you're poor. And then on top of it, here I was, a brown person. So with that, I was working, picking cotton and, vegetables and this and that to help the family, make ends meet. And so that was an incredible experience. When I think back on it, like when my consciousness raised is that as I was working in the fields, I was working side by side Black people. And that was my experience in terms of being in contact with African American people. And I remember when our school was going to be integrated, and there's all this talk, about, Black people coming to our school. And for me, it's like, okay, I worked with Black people in the fields of Texas. And so, there was a certain consciousness raised with those discussions, happening out loud, if you will, in the school and sort of in the small little neighborhood that I lived in. So my consciousness got raised when I was in high school, and so I did work in supporting the United Farm Worker boycott and trying to get information out to my small town about the working conditions of farm workers, because, here I was one myself. And I'm also a child of the 60s, if you will, in terms of, I was marching against the war in Vietnam and would go to Houston, to participate in that process, and met a lot of Chicano people. And at that time, Chicano meant people who are of Mexican descent who were born in the United States, and then met other people who were progressive also. And, lots of conversations with young people my own age about that the world could be different. We just had to work for it, and that we as a country had the means, but we had to fight for it. And so I ended up going to this national conference that was being held in El Paso, Texas. And I met people, obviously lots of Chicano, Mexicano people from all over the country that came to this conference. And the conference was, the main agenda was, how do we create an alternative political party? Because at that time, and I think it's probably the same conversation today, that, the parties, the two parties in our country were not responding to the needs of Chicano, Mexicano people. So that was the conversation, and I met people from Seattle. And I did not grow up speaking Spanish because my parents didn't want us to speak with an accent. And being in Texas, people do look down, with you where you were speaking with an accent, and I didn't have one. And so I was always being told, you're so different from your people. You speak differently, than your people. Well, It's still my people. Anyway, so I met folks from Seattle, and they said, come and visit, come and visit. And so I decided to come and visit. When you're a young person, you make all kind of moves, right, that you ordinarily wouldn't do today. And the occupation of El Centro de la Raza was happening in 1972. And, you know, I met people like Larry Gossett, you know, Bob Santos, Bernie Whitebear, and everybody like, come to Seattle, come and help us. It's like, why not? You know, kind of thing. And so the rest is history.
Wow. You know, I love starting with backgrounds because they create a foundation for who you have on the stage right here. And for me, grew up in Seattle, went to Garfield High School, and from the young age of, yeah, woo woo, I saw that, go Bulldogs. From the young age of 9, I just knew that I wanted to pursue something in television film. And so I kind of started training then. And you couldn't have told me then that, you know, one day I would have my own like daily talk show, right, on a Black-owned media company. And it's beautiful because, you know, part of the work for me is really uplifting the stories of community. So I'm so grateful to be in front of you all. And that brought me into community work. And I want to talk about the village that we have to build around us because so much of this work is taxing on us. I mean, Shalimar, you were talking about that in the beginning, right? How like, okay, I get exhausted. Right? And I was really intrigued to learn that you call on these women too, like, right? You guys are sharing conversations. I want to start with you, Miss Andrea. Like, when you think about the need for you to have that support, that village around you, you know, how do you build that to give you some solid ground, literally, to be able to do this work?
For me, it also starts within the organization, so my staff. I know that I can't do the work without them at Byrd Barr Place. So leaning on them, having them witness my vulnerabilities, places where I might not know what I don't know, but I have to lead and have the answers, calling them into those spaces with me. But then I also know more ethereally, we're all carrying an ancestral weight, right? We're all women of color on this stage representing generations of our people. Estela talked about where she came from, generations of our people. And so that's the village too. It's calling on the ancestors. What might they have done? Where are they guiding us today? And those ancestors help me connect with the ancestors of these ladies today. It helps create a very familiar place to be able to reach out and call them and say, I don't know, can you help me? Or I'm overwhelmed, can you support me? And the answer to that call has always been yes. And so engendering this idea of reciprocity, so because it's mutually symbiotic, when they call me, it's yes. Shalimar called, I was yes right away. I don't care what I got going on. I'll drive out to Solid Ground. I'll drive out to El Centro. I'll drive out to Neighborhood House, right? And so this idea that no person is an island, that we all need each of us in the work is also a construct that I carry in my mind. Byrd Barr Place can't do this work alone. I do need my community action network, Jeff. Right? I do need the 30 agencies across the state, even though we may not agree with each other. That's the village. But so is my staff, and so are my ancestral people.
Yeah, so true. Shalimar, when you think about, you know, the phone calls you have to make that, you know, it could be 1 a.m. or whatever, but you know you're going to get that answer. You know, how is it for you to have that supportive village around you?
I would say, you know, as a first-time CEO, it was game changing. I don't know if I would have survived being an organization in the pandemic if I didn't have this network of folks, if I didn't have Jeff and our WASCAP network, our state agencies that are doing this work, if I didn't have folks in my own personal friend group that I consider to be like my truth tellers, my own personal board of directors that I can go to and say, oh my God, I think I totally messed this up. Like, I did this, and this. And they're like, no, but like, tell us more about, right? So we have these deep conversations and you need that network, right? I have board members in this room. I need strong board members who also can endorse the work that I do, but then also call me out when maybe I don't always do it exactly the way, right? So I think that piece, having that network of folks, both professionally and personally, is so incredibly important. Like I said, like this work happens 24 hours a day. My wife is sitting in this room today, and it's also her support. Her support of taking care of the family, her support of taking care of the house, because I spend so much time at work, right? So it's this thing right here, these ladies saying yes with like one email. I think I was like, hey, can you guys do this? And they're like, sure, absolutely. Like, when do you want us? What time? Janice like changed a flight. Like, I'm gonna be here. Like that is so important, and that is like the power of community.
Yeah. Janice, when you think about it, because you were talking about, mentors and the work and folks being able to support you, how does that supportive network work for you to do this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if anybody here, or maybe if you guys have an executive coach, but, and I don't have one right now, but I did for my first 2 years as executive director, neighborhood house, and you could just be your full self and your truth. And my coach is also a woman of color, also a former executive director, can really know, and with that really incredible racial equity lens. And so, could really help me see, what I was doing and help me reflect on what I was doing. I wouldn't be here, without that kind of support, without the inspiration of those mentors that I talked about from JACL, and that just planted the seed, like, oh, I could actually be an executive director of a nonprofit organization just like Kip, or just like Dorothy, or just like Diane, or, I could see people that look like me that were doing it and that were successful at doing that. And then as a 23-year-old, like, oh yeah, I think I could do that. They're doing it, and we're in the same room, we're on the same board, and we're talking about the same things, and people are listening to me, so I guess I can do that. So that just gives me that validation that is possible. But then also just, calling people like these ladies, part of, I'm also, someone's also calling me too. And like, anytime Tony from Kitsap County calls, because he's on text and he's calling and like, where are you? Why aren't you in Spokane? Like, I'm in Japan. It's like midnight right now. So, it's okay. It's cool. Like, what do you need? But yeah, I really, really value that. And just, it's lonely because it's lonely as an executive director. It's lonely as a person of color. I can't tell you how many other meetings I've been on, lots of different, initiatives, like, the early learning developmental guidelines, or, we need, people to give input on this and that. And I walk into a room and you look around, you immediately size up the room, like, okay, how many other people of color are in this room? And who's leading this work? And that's just an instant calculus that you're doing, and you're just like, oh, okay, I know you, or you look friendly. And you just automatically, as a woman of color, as a leader of color, you're always looking for that support. And it's just so invaluable. And I represent Enton Minutes here, and I can only imagine how difficult it is to be in the legislature and to always be as a leader and being out there and pushing for things when people are saying no. I mean, we have to support each other. And, anything you need, Sharon needs, Bob, just please let us know, because we want to be there to support each other.
Yeah, support is key here. And I mean, that's what we're talking about, Ms. Estela, when you think about all of the folks who have been able to, create that village around you. Tell us more about how that's been a supportive factor for you in this work.
Thank you. Well, I feel very fortunate that, I referred to an occupation of a building. So in 1972, we occupied a building for the Chicano Mexicano community that was led by us, but supported by the African American community, the indigenous community, the Asian community, the anti-war movement at the time, and also the faith community. So those communities supported the occupation of this building, and those who slept in the building for 3 months you become a family because you had a mission that we had taken over a building, a bold step for the benefit of the broader Chicano-Mexicano community with all the support from those communities. And so that was nurturing from the very get-go. And so for the first 7 years of our existence, we worked as volunteers. There was no money, and we did what we could. And so we had the community, around us, those who became sort of the core people who were working. And so based on that, there was an immediate accountability to collectivity and what we were doing in our work, in terms of, sitting down, together, making decisions together. And that structure, when it started during the occupation of a collective group of people figuring out together what strategies are going to be, who we're going to organize, how are we going to get people to come and see us at the building, that still exists today, where we have something that is called charlas, which means a discussion that meets every Thursday from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. And what's going on there, it's staff who can get away from what they're doing. It's people who volunteer with us. And we're learning about social justice issues. When we first started, we discussed our own history because there was people of all, from different countries and people from different races who participated. And so we learned about the similarities in our struggle. And then, of course, learned about, who benefits from racism, who benefits from poverty, why is there sexism? So those are the topics that we discussed in the beginning. And then, of course, throughout, 50 years, we've had, trainings from the People Institute for Undoing Racism. We brought speakers in. We celebrate people's birthdays. And so there is a sense of community that is consistently around El Centro de la Raza, and that has been the support. And then, obviously we also have a leadership team that, again, they're directors, managers of departments. So I'm not making decisions myself. I feel consistently supported, and I feel lucky, to have worked in that kind of an environment.
Yeah. Well, that really brings me to kind of my next question here is this work is community work. I mean, no matter what sector it is, I want to talk more about how community is driving the work of your organizations, right? How do you stay plugged in so that community can be a key leading voice in what you're all doing? I'll start with you, Ms. Janice.
So as community action agencies, one of the, I guess, founding principles is that that we have maximum participation of our community in our work. And so one of the, requirements we all have is a third of our board are people that are democratically selected that represent the communities that we serve. So at the highest level, we have board members, with our former clients, former Head Start parents, people with lived experience that have been elected to represent the community that we served at the board. So that's, a starting point. I think just listening to our community, we have a community organizer, and she's been listening to, on the ground, what is going on at Burndale Homes and Furwood Circle in Auburn, and what are families concerned about and worried about, and will they want a fence or they want speed bumps, and can we get the landlords to do more, and let's help, let's elevate, let's write a letter, let's have a meeting, let's invite them, let's invite the police department, let's invite the landlord to our community meeting and have them listen to your concerns directly. So just, continuing to listen, continue to create opportunities to elevate voices, hiring the people that we serve. We have a lot of our community that we hire are from the community that we serve. At Neighborhood House, we have 40 different languages on staff, and, people that we hire them at one thing, and then they get promoted, and then they get promoted again, and then, continually developing their professional development so they can continue to move into leadership and higher positions if they choose.
Wow. Ms. Estela, you just talked about this a bit here with Chatlas. I love that, the discussions on Thursdays. Tell us more about how community is centered in the work y'all are doing, and it helps drive the work of El Centro de la Raza.
You know, I think that the kind of work that we do in terms of providing services to community puts us in touch with people. And so I want to go back to the Thursdays that we call charla. So we don't have community organizers. I mean, I see all of my staff as, you know, community organizers, but that's not their primary job, because there's really not funding out there, at least that we have been, you know, haven't been able to get. But we're getting in a position where we're going to be able to hire our own community organizers, and we plan to do that for 2024 because of what 2024 represents for this presidential election that's going to come up, you know. Thank you. So the intent of the charla, obviously, is to educate people about issues, whatever they may be, you know, all the topics that I mentioned and more. If there's, you know, actions that are happening, or testimony that needs to be given at city council, county council, and so forth. So the job of the staff person who is in that charla is to learn about that issue and then some way relay that to the participants that they see, because they've got the relationship with those individuals people that are coming to us, and the staff is trying to solve their problems. And so that's one concrete way. But obviously, El Centro does a lot in terms of community events, you know, putting us in touch with people, talking about, you know, political issues that are happening in our community, and, you know, just the regular, you know, when we do mobilizing, you know, for different issues that are important, not only in the Latino community, but when, you know, our communities are doing organizing and there's a call, you know, we're going to be there. So we've been fortunate to be able to build that into the structure that we do naturally, you know, to try to organize something. I'm trying to think of the event, something happened just like a few weeks ago, and we had like a number of people, you know, so how we justify when we're taking people to marches and this and that, that's your charla for this week. You're gonna go learn about that issue, okay?
Nice. Andrea, same for you. You know, how does community drive the work of Byrd Barr?
Similar to Janice's point about our tripartite board complement, and also we are required to do what's called a community needs assessment. So that's an opportunity for us to hear from community. That's where we do our deep listening. And we have two voices that we orient to. We have our Black community across Washington State, and then we have our low-income community living in the city of Seattle city limits. And so we primarily look at and listen to what are the needs versus what's out there in terms of resources. What are the issues that we need to be amplifying and seeking to solve? We're fortunate that we have clients coming through our doors every day, so we're hearing from them in real time. We're encouraging those conversations when they're in the building. And then we also, I'm happy to say that we own our own building. We have a space, right, where people can organize. So we encourage groups to organize in our building. We support that organizing. Space is valuable for our people. And we also support other groups, alliances. Oftentimes our issues are in common across our communities of color. So it's about building solidarity and also amplifying the issues from those communities, and then vice versa, they're amplifying issues in our communities. But what's most important is the data that we gather. It's been our cornerstone for at least a decade, being intentional about how we gather that data, where we gather it from. We do qualitative and quantitative data gathering. We use that information to inform organizing as a tool, but also inform policy making. So it's a resource that we push out to community. We don't sell it, but it is data that we gather by us, for us, that we share across our communities.
So important. Shalimar, let's talk about it. You know, how's community driving the work of Solid Ground?
I almost want to ditto what everybody said. It's one of the aspects of being a community action agency. I mean, even in the name in itself is community, right? And I think if for Solid Ground specifically, we do our community work in so many different ways, just like these folks have said. We serve 66,000 people annually, so that's 66,000 stories that we get to hear, and then that we get to do something with. And so taking that information, asking people, what keeps them up at night? What are the things that they are most proud of in their communities, so we can try to figure out how we uplift those and replicate those and support those things, support those organizations that are doing incredible work, and then also what are the things that they truly are very, very legitimately worried about, and then how do we try to work through systems to affect that change. And so, being able to ask those individual stories and then do the data collection through our community needs assessment. I'm incredibly proud of our board of directors. Right now we're going through a strategic planning process at Solid Ground, and part of the work of the board of directors is to lead the strategic planning work. Our board of directors did something a little bit different. I'm looking at a board member right now. Our board of directors did a little something different. They relinquished control of the strategic planning process to community. I have no idea what's going to come out of this process. I'm really excited to see. It's going to inform everything that I do probably for the next 5 years. But that going through that process, being able to take community members through human-centered design, so we can really drive and really get at the heart of what it is that Solid Ground as an organization can be and should be moving into the future, is so radically important. And it's such a change from so many different, I think, previous organizations or just in the past of nonprofits, where it'd be a group of folks, it'd be a group of staff sitting around saying, like, oh, what should we do? What should we do for the next 5 years? I don't know, let's do this. So being able to be led by community at the highest level, both at our board and our plan, and then for our staff, just like everyone else, our staff are incredibly diverse, and they have so many different stories that they are able to share amongst each other as well as with the agency. We do intersectionalities, conversations that happen virtually, where people can basically sign up and say, hey, for an hour, I want to do a learn to learn, and I want to talk about this thing, and then we have a dialogue about it. So we really, as an organization, really lean into both hearing and being led by community, as well as supporting the advocacy efforts that are needed to help make systems changes at both the state and at the county level.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're all talking about something that's so important here, is having the mindset and the intentionality to ensure community is a part of the process and finds the way to help drive the process in an authentic way, which I think, it takes, all that you're talking about, takes that village, everyone to understand the importance of community voice. And I know, Seattle Summers bodes a lot of different opportunities for outside events. So we're seeing more and more of that. But I love what you said there about the human-centered design. And I want to kind of dive into that, because we're starting to realize, it wasn't a thing in the past, designing with those who are using it in mind, or with those who are using it at the center. And so I want to talk a bit about community development and ownership. You were just talking about owning a building and the importance of space. So I'm going to start with you, because y'all just, have this newfound space. But so much of that development, you were listening to community the whole way through. And I want to hear about how, when we take on community development projects, when we're a part of others who are doing that work, how important it is for community to really be at the center of those kinds of projects.
First, I got to say that beautiful fire station on 18th Avenue, if you haven't been by there, you got to go see it. It's between Cherry and Columbia, 15,000 square feet. It's Black people's house. Right? Because our original home was firebombed in the 60s. And we were forced to move into that building, that 117-year-old building that was owned by the city. So for a long time, I've been there 20 years, for a lot of my life there, we were renters. And the city of Seattle was our landlord. So there's only so much that we could do in the building in terms of activating the building. And forget human-centered design, it was a 117-year-old building that wasn't even ADA compliant. Hell, it wasn't even earthquake-proof. I would tell staff when we oriented them their first week, part of my spiel was, if there's an earthquake, you gotta jump out the window because you're not gonna make it down the stairs. And I have to actually remember to not say that now because it's so ingrained and imprinted in me. But it's a beautifully renovated building. We had to raise $12.8 million to renovate it, but we did it. We got the building from the city, which took 10 years. But through that process, as TraeAnna said, we were gathering feedback from our community. What do the people want? How should we activate this building? This isn't our building, this is community's building. Right? How do you want to be in the building? How do you want the building to honor you? How do you want the building to honor the work that's gone there before? We're a civil rights organization. We were created in '64 to power the national civil rights movement. So even though we're a community action agency, first and foremost, we were created by Black people for Black people in the Central District. So if you think about what was happening in the CD in the 60s, it was redlined. So it's Black people's house. And so we were really intentional about understanding how people needed the building to be for them. Low-income clients coming in for services, folks who needed to organize, partner organizations who needed meeting space, and just plain community residents. And so we were sitting with designers. We did 9 months long feedback, and our designers kept, bringing us all these plans, all these different iterations, and we'd say, you gotta take it back to the drawing board, and I swear I'm not a diva, but they felt like I was a diva, just like, what's going on here? You're just a social service agency. Why don't you just be happy with the thing? And I said, here's what I'm going for, because you're not meeting the standard. I'm going for plastic surgery waiting room. I ain't never been in one, but I seen one on TV. That's what my people deserve. We deserve natural lighting where you can have them, soft lighting where we need artificial lighting. We need space. And we need colors on the walls that speak to us, that support us. I need a building that says you belong here. I need a building that says we harbor the legacy and tradition of Black people. And that's what you'll see when you come to Byrd Bar Place. And yes, we provide services like the market, right? Our former food bank is now the market, utility assistance, water assistance, rental assistance, financial education, and organizing. But it's a beautifully renovated building, brand new, that says you belong here.
Yeah, so important. Ooh, I got the chills on that one. That gave me the goosies. Miss Estela, El Centro de Raza now, known for being a voice when it comes to community development, ownership of our projects. Tell us more about how y'all have been able to interpret that work.
Thank you. Well, we started taking over a building that is 3 stories, 57,000 square feet, and it was a white elephant, but it's something that we could develop for our community. And we've always had, our philosophy, the leaders of the organization, if you will, is that is our land, even though it may be owned by somebody else, but it's still our land. And the tax dollars that we pay, those are our tax dollars, and they're to benefit community, and we've just got to fight for it and get it and bring it back home to create programs and so forth. So we have always had that mentality, and when the opportunity presented itself, El Centro sits on 3 acres of land. We had an acre of land that was vacant. It was used as a parking lot, and it was going to face the brand new Beacon Hill light rail station. And the city of Seattle, organized that, people in the neighborhood need to discuss, like, what do they want? And to tell you the truth, we were always fighting with our neighbors, because the El Centro de la Raza neighborhood became gentrified. And so the people who were moving in didn't really support that we were there. And we didn't own the building at that time. We didn't buy the building till 1997. And there was a philosophical reason as to why. And it's from our Native American sisters and brothers that everyone owns the land. It shouldn't belong to anyone. And so we wanted to put that philosophy into practice. And so we were always asking for a 99-year lease. We didn't have in our mind that we should own the property ourselves. But when it began to become gentrified, and those people who were gentrifying it were trying to take it away from us. They actually wanted to create a community development corporation, even though we had been there since 1972. And we said, okay, it's time to own it, because we're gonna own it for the good of the community. And so that was a really important step in buying that building in 1997. And we paid like $1.6 million for it. So the acre of land, if you have been to El Centro where the Plaza Maestros development is at, the land was worth $5 million. That was 1 acre of land, $5 million, and we bought it for 1.6. So that was a great investment, if you will. Thank you. So, in terms of building, this housing for our community with, some offices, early childhood development, a community center, in many ways, to be, frank, it's not something that we had in a strategic plan. It kind of just fell on the shoulder, on us, into our laps, because the light rail was going to be across the street. And so, we're very fortunate to be positioned like that. And of course, we developed it into something that everyone could be proud of. And as we organized, we went to every business in the neighborhood, the neighbors that were around, we sent out information. But most importantly, we talked to our people who would come to the food bank, who would come to get a hot meal, who were coming for, homeless services or a bag of food. We would talk to them individually and say, this is what we want to do. We want to build housing. We want to do this. We want to do that. What do you all think about that? And of course, our people were so, sometimes they didn't even know what to say, because no one had ever asked them for their opinion about something as important as development. And so, we would do things like we had to create a Friends of El Centro to combat the gentrifiers that were still in the neighborhood, not wanting us to build. And so we would talk to people and say, well, do you want to send a letter to the city council? And of course, people were stunned, like a letter to the city council. Just because I was out there doing that work also. And I would say, just tell me what you want to say, and I'll put it down in writing for you. And so I have to tell you this story because it's hilarious. We ended up sending like about 350 letters to the city council that, we needed to build housing, we needed to go up to 65 feet. And our opposition at the time, that El Centro de la Raza, how can they send so many letters to the city council? I mean, it was like we had done something wrong because we were mobilizing to show that there was community support. And I guess, there's a lot that I could talk about, but the thing that I think is most important in terms of the development that El Centro de la Raza did, and and I say this with all due humility, is that organizations, in the respective communities, in the Asian community, the Filipino Community Center, Native American church groups, ethnic business groups would come to us and say, how did you do this? We want to do it too. So I swear we had so many different meetings with people to explain how we did it. And you can see it now. You can see it in Seattle in terms of the apartment complexes and community facilities and so forth that are being developed as a result of the work that we did. And I say that with humility, but we all learn from each other in terms of what we're doing and how we can do that. So I'm going to stop because I'm a talker,
Oh, that was great. That was great. Thank you. I wanna come to Shalimar and Janice in this regard. I mean, whether you're doing development work or not, just how does this resonate with Neighborhood House, Janice?
Well, we don't have a 57,000 square foot building that we own, but I think I want to take a little bit different tack. One of the things that we're doing is called the whole family approach, and that centers the family or the individual client experience on our work. And so as Neighborhood House is a large organization, we have about 30 different programs. We're located, we serve people from Seattle all the way to Auburn, Kent, Renton, Tukwila, Burien, White Center. And individuals come to our programs for maybe they're looking for early learning, or they're looking for a youth program, or they need a job, or they need rental assistance. And then we have people that are doing rental specialist or employment specialist or teacher or home visitor, but they don't necessarily know what's going on in the rest of the organization. And so what we're doing right now is we're doing a journey map. So when a person comes to Neighborhood House, we are centering that person's experience. So from the time they contact us to the time we talk to them to connect them with services, like what is their experience and how are we connecting them with all of the different services that we offer. And the way human services is structured, it's very siloed. Okay, you have a grant, here's the employment grant, Workforce Development Council gives you a grant for employment, and then Head Start gives you a grant for early learning, and then the city gives you a grant for something else, and BSK gives you a grant for youth, and everything has their own system and their own forms and their own eligibility criteria. And we were really good at, writing the grants and meeting the criteria, but we're less good at really understanding and centering that client experience. And so that's what we're doing. We're going back to the drawing board. We're looking at our organizational structure. We're talking to families. Families don't know, oh, you offer that? I had no idea. Oh, that's Neighborhood House? I didn't know. And so, we have a lot of work to do, even though we've been around for a long time. But we're breaking that down. We're centering the family. We're centering the client. And we're designing our system so that they better meet our community's needs.
Yeah, that's necessary. Shalimar, I mean, whether it's development or centered, approaches, how does this resonate for Solid Ground?
Yeah, I think one of the things that that led me to apply and then eventually accept the role at Solid Ground is innovation. And when I think about community development, I think about both assets, that folks have shared around having your own space. That is your space, whether it's a space of the community, and owning that asset, and the power that comes with that. For Solid Ground, it's both having assets, and we've got housing at Magnuson Park, and we've got housing in First Hill and all sorts of other places, but it is also the space of innovation that Solid Ground historically and will continue to do as an agency. And that space has really been, I like to really consider Solid Ground, if I were to summarize it, as almost an incubator of anti-poverty programs. And it is filled with a bunch of creative thinkers. It is filled with board members and volunteers that are creative thinkers that are constantly challenging, how do we do this better? That we're constantly looking at customer service and customer experience and saying, how do we do this work better to better support and serve community? And when we start to do that, we start to create programs, because we like to create programs. And when we create those programs and we do them so well, we like them to become their own organizations. Because then their reach is even bigger. And so I think about the start of so many organizations when they think about community development, organizations like Seattle Tilth and Lehigh and Family Works, all of them had their start at Solid Ground as programs. And now they are huge organizations within our communities, furthering their own impact and what we need and what the community says that they need, right? So that piece, that innovation, to be the incubator of things, to be the ones that are okay experimenting, that are okay sometimes not getting something right, because eventually when we do get it right, it can lead to phenomenal results. That is community development at Solid Ground.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about the work of the organization, and I want to merge back into these amazing women leading this work. And I want to start with you, Ms. Estela, when we think about the balance. I mean, we talked earlier about the need for this to be something that's a calling, right? It is something that draws you into it. And for you in particular, I mean, 50 years, that's like 50 years of solid dedication that I can't even imagine. But I want to really focus a bit more now on the balance for all of you. How do you find that balance? Because oftentimes this work is 24/7, 365. What does it look like for you to really establish that balance, and how do you do it?
I'm probably not the best person to talk about balance because, I mean, I work hard. I have worked 24/6. I take Saturday off. That's the only day that I take off. And it's because I'm committed. This is for me. Everybody has their own way of contributing. So just because, I will work 6 days a week, long hours, that's my satisfaction, that I'm helping build community in that way. And honestly, I mean, the way that I have worked for 50 years, I don't know why I don't get tired. I really don't. To prove that point, I have 1,400 and something vacation hours that I haven't used. So that kind of proves my point. And so I am starting to say, okay, maybe I could start taking Fridays off. But that hasn't worked so well right now because it seems like always something comes up. But like I said, everyone is different, and that is my calling. That is my mission. That's why I've stayed there for 50 years and done every conceivable job, because, again, this is for me personally in how I grew up and what poverty and discrimination and sexism means, and it's my life calling. And so I take pleasure in what I do. What I read, what I have to analyze, the meetings that you have to go to. So that's what it is for me. So I'm probably, again, not the best person for balance.
Well, I'm glad we start there. Maybe we'll find some balance throughout the panelists here. Janice, how do you maintain some semblance of balance?
Oh, wow, that's a lot of hours. I have boundaries, so I definitely, my kids are grown up now, but when I was executive director at another organization, I was co-parenting with my ex-husband, and so I wouldn't schedule my meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays when I had the kids. And so I try and okay, let's just limit our nighttime meetings to 2 a week or something like that, and okay. And then if you do work late, like today, I was gonna have a long day, so I didn't start my day till 9. So okay, I'm just gonna take it easy. I took a little break in the middle of the day. So trying to, not kill myself. Why are you laughing?
I forget you. You said 9.
At 9 a.m.
What is 9? What?
The start date?
That's the start time? She works 12-hour days, so.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's still 12 hours, yeah, I guess. Yeah. But I took 2 weeks off, so like I said in my intro, I was in Japan. And I took 2 weeks off, and I put everything on auto reply, and I had somebody, and I had an acting executive director, and things didn't, the world didn't implode. It was fine. Everything was fine. Everybody, right? Everything happened like it was supposed to. So, yeah.
There we go. Good for you taking those 2 weeks off. Yeah, it's good for you. No, we need it. We need it, right? Shalimar, tell us about balance for you, if you have it. Tell us.
I think I also took 2 weeks off. No, I'm joking. So my balance is rooted in the empowerment of my staff, and that is so important in this work because there is no end to the work in sight, right? And so for me, it's about, and this was, every organization I come into, and I have a design, like a product design background, so I tend to use that a lot, is rooted in like this idea of like, how do we do something better? And so when I go into organizations and I see that like staff are working 12, 14, 16-hour days constantly, I'm like, how do we bring that to a more manageable level of like 8? Please, 8-hour days. And even then, I'm kind of stressed about 8 hours. And so again, for me, it was really starting to ask those questions and then starting to really listen to the answers. And sometimes staff are like, wow, I don't know, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So then it's, how do we get you the knowledge and the skills? Or how do we get you to feel like the decision that you make, the organization is gonna back you up no matter what? And oftentimes that is one of the fears of like, if I make this decision on my own and I make a mistake, I'm gonna get thrown under the bus because I made that mistake. And that's not something that happens. That's not something that should happen ever, but that's not something that happens at Solid Ground, right? We learn from our mistakes and then we grow together as a team. And so by being able to have those systems where any of our staff at different points in time can make a decision, it means that I get less phone calls. It means I get less text messages. It means that I get to have an 8-hour day. It means that I get to get my solid 8 hours, sometimes 9 hours of sleep, and I am getting real close to my bedtime, but I'm trying my best to hold on. It means that I get to go on vacation and turn off my emails and turn off my phone, and then when I get back, I have not as many emails as I think because people have solved the things on their own. Like, that's the whole point of this, is like, we don't need us to work 15-hour days if we have a team of folks that collectively, again, this is community, that collectively we can all make those decisions and we can all trust each other that we're all gonna do our part and we're gonna do the best we can.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, absolutely. Miss Andrea, balance for you. Tell us more.
Cannot tell a lie. Cannot tell a lie. I don't have it. I'm seeking it. I am leaving Byrd Bar Place. June 30th is my last day, right? I would have been there 20 years though. I'll be 49 on June 20th and I started in my 20s. So do I need the rest? I need the rest. And so I'll be taking 6 months off. And it's important during that 6 months that I learn to reorganize how I show up in this work. Because I'm gonna reemerge in social justice work. But when I land there in January, I need to have changed the paradigm for myself to not work the 16-hour days. And to know that that's okay, because it's two different things, right? Your body has to feel it, but then mentally you've got to connect with that. So today I'm not doing that. But part of it is this setup you feel when you feel called to the work. I feel called to the work. It actually doesn't feel like work. It's what I was designed to do. I would not do anything else. I feel natural in this work, but then it sets you up because then you're working 18 hours a day and you're working 7 days a week. But I understand at 49, I can't continue like this. It is not sustainable. I may have thought I'd gotten away with it for 20 years, but I know it's telling in my body, right? And I need to honor my body. So for me, it's about understanding how we live into the justice of the Estelas of the world. The Estelas may not have been able to rest, so she has 1,000 vacation hours. Because there was a world that told Estela and our elders and our ancestors that rest was not an option, and that rest is for when you have time, right? And so we get to live into the justice that she fought for, sacrificed for, and our ancestors died for, which is we know that rest is part of the work. Rest is liberation, right? So while I'm not practicing it, TraeAnna, I have every commitment to learn to do that differently in those 6 months. Every commitment. Because I do want to reemerge into work, and I want to be able to speak in integrity that says, here's what you need to do, social justice leaders. Here's how we need to show up into work. Rest is liberation. And the paradox there is that when you do rest, you build the capacity to do more, right? We just have to know that and embody that. So I'm going to learn that in 6 months.
Oh, that was beautiful. And I'll add to this because I think, as we were just having a great conversation in the green room, we were like, we need to just bring the speakers and the microphones and just a camera so y'all can see what we were talking about. But so much of that is I found that my body, it will tell me, right? And so if you're doing a lot in community because you feel called to the work and because you understand the importance of your contribution, for me, it is very much, I'm continuing legacies that were started way before me, thousands of years ago. And how do I utilize my energy to make the world a better place for my sons and for their offspring and for future generations? So much of it for me, then my body says, okay, shut down. And I think many of us experienced adjustments with COVID, right? I mean, it was like, okay, you're telling me I got to be inside. You're telling me I can't be around other people. So I got to sequester myself in my room if I get this virus, right? But we experienced it. And I think for me, I emerged understanding something a bit differently about the work that we all do, because I understood if I'm going to be here for future generations, I need to do exactly what you're talking about. So many of us don't have the balance. It's very true. I'm guilty of it too. That's why I love to talk about that, because I think the more that we're putting that in the forefront as we talk about the importance of this work, the more dedicated we can become to that. Before we open it up for the audience, any last words? I'm going to start with you, Miss Janice.
Wow, no prompts, no,
Yeah.
oh God.
Just, last words for you.
Last words, wow. I mean, it's just such an honor to be here and to be surrounded by these incredible women to do this important work. I feel like I'm just like continuing on the legacy of the people that have gone before me, and I just hope I can keep the work going. I guess the last word for me is I hope that we live in a community, in a country, in a world that doesn't require for us to be here. And like, we are continuing to do this work, and we've been at it for a long time. And we need to do things differently. We need an attitude adjustment. We need some leadership adjustments, because it's not enough, the work that we're doing, it's important, but it's a drop in the bucket as far as meeting the needs. And what we really need is real change, systemic change, so that we don't need to be here anymore. And we can focus on making art or music or some other, being a grandparent, or I don't know, something, right? Not close there yet, but that's gonna be like 10 years. But, to do something else. So I hope for that day.
That's great. Miss Estela?
Yes, couple of things. I wanted to make the point about the importance of community-based organizations having assets, creating assets, whether it's through affordable housing, whether it's through a community center, whether it's through this little bookstore that was right across the Centro was called Estelitas. And everybody thought it was named after me. But it was named, this man named his baby Estela, so it was Estelitas. Well, he just recently received a grant for over $2 million to make it a bigger place. So the reason, obviously, that we want to create assets is that our community needs that. We need to become stronger. But the more that we create assets in our community becomes stronger, and we become stronger as organizations, because the fight is yet to come. It's yet to come. And so we need, when you have assets, you have power and you have resources to be able to hire the community organizers and others to help organize our communities. And just lastly that I want to say is that thank you for being here with us on this beautiful day outside, and here you are in the dark listening to us. And El Centro has opened its doors again, so if you just want to come and visit and see what we do firsthand, if you want to volunteer, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you.
Thank you. Miss Andrea.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure to serve alongside these ladies. It's been special for me to serve in community action, Jeff, and just be into social justice work. I think that we're in a time where there's just a lot of negative experiences out in the world today coming at us, that really this is also a hopeful time. As I sit here as a black-bodied person, it means a lot to me to sit on this stage and to talk about Black liberation, to talk about my people and our hopes and visions for our future, and not leave this room and feel like my life is being threatened because I'm talking about that. So we have come a long way, and there's a lot to be hopeful for. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. Miss Shalimar.
I'm so ready for these audience questions. I have an ask, I guess, for this group, and if you can pass this message along to folks in your network, which is go vote, please, please go vote. There are some significant levies coming up within this area. We've got a presidential election that that's going to be happening next year. So go vote. It's so important. Our agencies, we are the safety net, and we're also agency leaders that often look and say, where is the safety net to the safety net? Because there are so many holes in it. And so what we need is your power. We need your voice as folks who have the ability to affect change at multiple levels. And one of the very best ways is to pay attention to who you elect, ask the right questions, do your own research, and then go vote. So that would be my ask for this group.
Right on, right on. We definitely want to spend some time asking any audience questions. We have Anna there who has the mic, please.
1, 2, 3.
All right, we got 3 in the queue.
Hello, everybody. My name's Denise Love, and I have the pleasure and honor of being one of Andrea's board members. Just giving this beautiful woman a round of applause. She didn't know I was coming tonight, but I'd be remiss if I didn't show up for her as this beautiful, bold Black woman who raised over $12 million to own a building, a Black organization within the Central District, and I'm just so proud of you. So I have a question and also a call to action for all of you, but Andrea, if you could start. So I think you all sit so beautifully and polished on the stage, but we also know the hard, gritty work that it takes to get to where we are today. So would each of you just quickly mind sharing what's been one of the most difficult parts of your journey, like the grittiest, the ugliest? Share that with us briefly, but then also give the audience a call to action on what we all can do to help continue to push the will forward.
That's a great one.
Yeah, it's raggedy some days. Right. For me, it's been when I'm in tension with my own people. right? It's hard, it's painful, and how do you strike that balance between respecting your people and understanding that, sometimes their pain, trauma shows up as personality, and their pain can come through their personality, and it is really about the pain, but then it's also standing in honor and acknowledgement and respect for myself. So what does that balance look like, right? Do I call you out right now? Do I defend myself? Do I just be graceful? I don't know, right? So the example I'll use is we did a major turnaround of this organization. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but we knew that the organization needed to evolve. We knew that we needed to do some different things to ensure that we remain a resource to Black Washingtonians. And part of that was reframing who we are in our essence. We're still the DNA of the organization. We're still civil rights. We're still community action. We're still camp, y'all. We're Centro Area Motivation Program, right? But we rebranded. And there were a few people in our community who that didn't go over well with. And so folks, my own people were protesting me. And that was very painful. My own people were putting up my photos, flyers with my photos on telephone poles and trees throughout the CD that said wanted for dismantling the Black community, whilst I was working on behalf of the Black community. And so that was my deepest, darkest moment, but understanding soulfully that what I was doing was the right thing and that it was the path we needed to take kept me steady, but it was deeply painful. I felt raggedy, but I came out on the other side of it.
Anyone else want to take a gander?
You said you felt raggedy. I feel that. That was great. I feel like I've had so many, unfortunately. But I will say that, Solid Ground has a unique tension as an agency, and our tension is both in our approach to our advocacy work, and also our anti-capitalist sentiment and structure that we use as an agency, and really what I think we're ultimately committed to. And that tension comes out when you have a hierarchy in an agency, and when you're the CEO. I think somebody once told me, like, heavy is the crown that you wear. Like, that's kind of what it is, right? So having to have those internal battles of who gets to make a decision, and why does that person get to make a decision, and how are they utilizing their knowledge and their skills to make a decision, is something that I essentially wrestle with every day. And sometimes I ask myself those questions of, do I need to check myself in how I'm doing this type of work? Am I leading, or I'm going and directing this organization in this direction that ultimately is going to result in something fantastic? And if the answers are like, yes, 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 then that is, right? So that idea of having that North Star is so important in any of the work that we do, and for me as an individual. And I've had all sorts of, different moments in time where people have questioned, should a Black woman be in that sort of a position? Should a Black woman that young have that sort of position? I've been in situations where I've had nooses hung in buildings because I was the first Black executive to be in that space. Those are really, really horrific stories. But what I always kind of centered around was, like, the North Star of why I said yes to that role was because I wanted to affect a certain sort of change. And as long as we're continuing to move in that direction, then I'm okay in that space.
Wow. Anyone else? I'll say this. It's really similar for me to what Andrea was talking about in terms of, dealing with trying to dismantle certain things, but it starts in the mind. The scarcity mindset oftentimes is such a destructive force. And I love how you asked us to give a call to action. And what I would say is that we all have choices of how we treat people. And so much of what the panelists have talked about today is serving those who oftentimes feel othered in whatever way it is, whether it's poverty or their ethnic background or whatever. And I think we all have opportunities to embrace others, to embrace each other, one another as human beings, embrace each other in love so that we can really begin to create a sense of belonging across the state of Washington that allows for everyone to feel as though they belong. I think that's a really key element here, because when we talk about social justice work in the ways that we've been describing, so much of it is to dismantle all of the intentionality that was built into systems. But systems in and of themselves don't run themselves. People do. And so think about what you do on your job or in your, volunteer work or in your community. How do you show up for other people? And how do you show up as the best version of yourself? I think when we're all doing that, we all begin to dismantle these systems of oppression, because it means that we have to uphold that oppression wherever we are and in anything we do. So if we're not doing that, if we're all finding the way to embrace one another, to make sure that the person in front of you feels as though you're really listening to them and they belong in that space with you, I think the better our world becomes. And that's going to constantly be my mantra to folks is let's move with love at the center, because we all need it. We all do. So thank you for that question.
Hi. So what policy would you like to see dismantled, like each one of you personally?
I'll start. It's not really a policy. I think it's a practice. But in human services, the work that we do is critical human infrastructure. It's early learning, it's after-school programs, it's housing stability, it's employment. Our community, the voters, our politicians, they want that. They want that really critical human infrastructure stuff that we do, but they're not willing to pay for it. And so anytime that a government goes out and they decide, we're going to build a bridge, we're going to fill potholes, we're going to, whatever, we're going to have like dog catchers and whatever, right? We're going to do these things, and we're going to pay a livable wage, like a market wage, an actual wage that is commensurate with that level of skill and expertise. But when it comes to human services, because the work that we do in the fields and the workers are primarily women and primarily people of color, we are undervalued. And so the practice is that when they go out, when the city, the county, the state, the feds, they go out to bid, what do they pay? What do they expect? They're going to expect us to pay the lowest that we can get away with to be competitive. And so I would change that, and we're working to change that policy. We're raising awareness especially at the city and the county level with the Seattle Human Services Coalition, and we're working with other human service providers together to educate, and we're making some progress. It's not enough. On average, a human services worker makes about 37% less than somebody with the same education qualifications, emotional labor skill, than someone working in some other field that's not human services. So I would change that.
Well, let's see. I'm just trying to what's most important. Obviously, El Centro, and I think Seattle has been pretty progressive in wanting immigration reform, our country. It's broken. We wonder, why are there, thousands of people that are at the southern border? And we think that those people are just coming to come and, take jobs away or live, off of, benefits programs. But we have to take a deeper look and what led those people there. And it has been for centuries that the United States has stolen the resources of those countries. And the money came to the US and didn't stay in those countries to develop those countries. So, when we see all of that on the television, I want you all to remember that, because it's extremely important. Our people come here to work because there's nothing else. You know, there's just nothing else in terms of what's happening in Central America and, you know, just the different South American countries. And then the other thing, I just happened to listen to a couple of, you know, podcasts today that reminded me the horror of how how people are killing each other on a daily basis because there's not adequate gun control, you know, these high-powered machines, you know, guns that blow the faces off of children like they did in Uvalde. And so those are two things that we are working on and continually work on because we know that it's a long struggle, but we've got to continue the work. And the thing around voting, which I think is extremely important, is that the powers who are not for progress in our country, they want us to get disillusioned. They want us to get depressed. They want us to say, this system isn't working, why should I even go out and vote? And we need to vote because they want that to happen. And the only way, and where you play a role, where I think several people have said today, is that you've got to be involved in community working on issues, because once you're raising the consciousness of others to do that work, they are automatically going to go out and vote. Thank you.
I agree with Estela. Take it from an immigrant herself. Nobody wants to leave their home. I left my home because my country outgrew its carrying capacity. Right, I'm grateful to have been allowed to be here, become a citizen, and grow a life here. But my home is in British Guyana. That's where my body belongs. But I can't be there because of policies of more developed nations encroaching on underdeveloped nations. Right now, I've got ExxonMobil in my country doing heinous things that the United States would not allow here from any other foreign companies. My policy change would be, how do we culturally and functionally change the way we invest in capitalism? And I'll say counterfeit capitalism because Mercer Baradaran wrote the book, The Color of Money. It's a really good read where she talks about how capitalism works for some people but not others. So I'd like to see policies at the federal and state level that benefit individuals, the individual well-being of people, rather than corporations.
I feel like you might have been like eavesdropping in my house yesterday because we were just having a conversation a little bit. That's real funny. There are so many policies that I would love to change. So I'm gonna root this in a story and try to be brief. The policy, and it's very similar to what we just heard about capitalism, is actually a mindset shift. And I don't know how to do it in policy, so I'm gonna say it as a shift, as a cultural shift for us as a nation, of the idea that if you just hustle enough, if you just grind enough, if you take that LLC and then you buy an $80,000 car because you can write it off, and then from there you can spend that money, and then you can invest it in some bonds, and then you can take those bonds, and then it's like this game of Frogger, of like you have to do all of these moves to just live your life. And so my policy change is really rooted in a dream of like, I just want people to be happy. Like, that's what I want. I want people to have their basic needs met, whatever that basic need is for them, because my basic needs are gonna be different than the ladies on this stage, right? And so that's my hope and that's my dream. I don't know how to root that in a policy, so I will say, policy related, we have a policy at the federal level that is related to SSI and disability benefits. And so it's an unfortunate policy that is really tied to an income cap. And so in that income cap, folks that are on disability or SSI, oftentimes they need to have zero or very little income, which oftentimes means that those folks can't get married. And there is actually written language in the federal level about marriages for folks who have disabilities or are getting disability benefits. That is an atrocious policy in my mind, and I cannot imagine being with someone and then not actually being able to marry them because there's a law written somewhere that says if you do, you're not going to get the benefits, and then if you don't get the benefits, you don't get your food. If you don't get your food, you don't get your housing, you don't get this. Like, that is such a ridiculous thing that we have in our federal policies.
Oh, these are some fire policies. I'll add one and just say that there's something here, and I forgive me because I don't know the exact policy, but there's intentional harm that was caused to Black communities, indigenous communities in particular, and yet now there's all this money that comes through that says we want to help communities, but we can't actually say that. We can't actually just say, we're going to give money to Black community to do X, Y, Z, to repair these past harms, even though we as a state have admitted that we caused intentional harm on Black and indigenous communities. We don't get to say this money is going to go directly to Black or indigenous communities. And I have the hardest time wrapping my head around that, because what a lot of folks end up doing, and y'all probably know this all too well, is we write grants that say, you know, we're here to help the most marginalized communities, the ones most disproportionately impacted by XYZ. We use all of these terms to get around the fact that what we're talking about is repairing the harms that were intentionally caused to these very specific ethnic communities. And we just can't say that because, oh yeah, you know, we can't say that. But what we can say is this, and it's causing such a problem for me internally, and I'll be very transparent with you all, that I have sat in backdoor meetings with legislators and politicians and so many folks to say, why do we have to do it this way? This is ridiculous. And so that's what I would love to do. I would love to be able to say to the communities that have been the most harmed, to say, no, we're calling this out because we know what we did historically, and we are fixing that. We are going to create reparations right now for the communities that have never gotten it. And this is very specific to Black communities that have never gotten it. But all of this harm was caused. So I would love to be able to directly have investment into those communities and for it to be acknowledged as such. Thank you for that.
Good evening. My question centers around imposter syndrome. My name is Shalice Seacrest. I am the current vice president of the regional NAACP. I'm running to become the next president of the regional NAACP. This is my running mate. She's running for vice president. Once elected, we will be the first women to ever hold office in an organization that was founded in 1909 and been in Washington State for over 100 years. No woman has ever held that position. I've always been, right? It's always been a woman doing the work, the man having the vision, and we're the ones who make the magic happen to take that vision and actually put it into practice. We've said finally, no, we're gonna do it ourselves, right? The question for this panel though is imposter syndrome. What have you guys done? How do you handle the voices? Because I'll be honest, even when I told Cynthia, who's brilliant, Ivy League educated, a boss at what she does, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna lead this organization. It took her a couple of weeks before she gave me the answer. Yes, Shalee, I'll stand by your side, we can do this. That imposter syndrome, the voices that are in our heads that tell us we don't belong, you're a fraud, there's other people who actually can do this work and you just got in here for your other reasons, right? Imposter syndrome, it's a real thing. How do you guys handle those voices in your head, that imposter syndrome? How have you guys all become bosses in the industry that you guys lead and carry this work forward despite those voices? Thank you.
So first of all, I just want to say I appreciate how you let this audience know that when you win, it wasn't if, it was the first thing we're gonna do when we win is do this. Like I appreciate that. So good luck to y'all. Such an interesting thing. So I have something that I do very specifically. So I will give the action that I do. So I keep a kudos file in my email. And anytime I get something, it could be a note, it could be anything, I put it in that file. And when I have moments of doubt, or when I have moments of I'm not sure if I'm the right person, or whatever it is, I open that file and I read the comments. That's what I do.
I love that. I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to create a kudos file when I get home. Because some days the voice is overwhelming that says, you can't, you shouldn't, still don't, even after 20 years, still don't belong there. Are you sure you were, credentialed to be there? And then, of course, there's the outside world that reinforces that, right? You're a woman, you shouldn't be there. You have kids, you need to be home taking care of the kids. You don't need to be. And so for me, I was fortunate also to grow up alongside my grandmother who ran her house. So she modeled that for me. It's kind of like you need to see it to believe it. And she instilled that in all the women in our family. So I do have that construct. And then I also understand, to Shali's point, that there are wonderful women in these movements walking alongside men who the work somehow makes us invisible. Right? And it's only recently, I think, women recognize that doors of opportunities may not open for us, but what do? We jump through the window and open it for ourselves. So we see enough of that, and it begins to reinforce the voice that says, yes, you can, yes, you are, and of course, you're powerful, right? But it's still a work, right? It's the kudos file. For me, I run half marathons, and I put all the doubts on the road in front of me. Yep, I'm coming at mile 5, I'm coming at mile 10, get you, And so, there's the endorphins when you're done running, so I feel like a Navy SEAL when I'm done. So for me, that does it as well. That's my kudos file. But at the same time, it's being able to see other models of other women in these spaces that reinforces it for me. And I'll say, when I first started out 20 years ago, there weren't a lot of us in these spaces. And quite frankly, there were other women challenging me being in these spaces, like, you too young, or don't you have young kids at home, or you shouldn't. And so that really flipped me. It did a number on me. But as I got older and I stepped into my power, and remembered, because my grandmother is now deceased, how she walked this journey, it instilled in me that yes, I can. And yes, it's possible. And so many women walking alongside men on this journey, right? Roberta Byrd Barr is one of them. Our namesake, we're named after Miss Roberta Byrd Barr, Byrd Barr Place, who was instrumental in Seattle's civil rights movement. And we did not know about her, a lot of us. We learned about her after she was deceased. But incredible woman doing incredible work, desegregations in the Seattle High School, Seattle School District. She went on to star in A Raisin in the Sun. She hosted a TV show, right? She did incredible things in our community, and we did not know about her. But she walked alongside the men in the movement in the 60s. And I honor that.
I was also young when I had my first executive director position, and the organization that I ran, Denise Louis Education Center, we were kind of in hot water for a while, and it was another woman that really helped me kind of get through that. So in Head Start, you have this program specialist. Her name was Glory Davis, and she's old school, been through Head Start, a Head Start parent herself, and became a Head Start program specialist, and we were having difficulties, and she helped me get the resources to hire a consultant to help me fix some of the challenges that we were having. And I always remember just how she helped me solve this problem in the lowest moment as like a 30-year-old brand new executive director, and it really made a difference to get me over that hump. And then once I got over that hump, there were many more humps to go over, so many. And then I always just remember like, oh, well, I got through that hump, then I can get through this. Is way easier than that hump that I was able to get through. And so there's always going to be a new mountain to climb, but just think about all of the mountains you've already climbed to get to where you're at, and you can do it. And no one else is going to do it. So you got to like, well, I'm just going to put my head down. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to worry about it, because if I don't do it, then it's going to fall apart. So you just got to do it and trust yourself, and you'll get through it, because you did all those other things, right?
Well, it's a difficult question for me because, you know, obviously when I make mistakes, I have arguments with myself, you know, in terms of talking things, you know, in my mind, how it should have been handled, that I should have gotten advice from my leadership team, you know, those kind of things. But for the most part, I have that leadership team that I work with, you know, daily, weekly, that provides, you know, where I may be doubting something or another. I bounce these things off of our people. And so again, that's just sort of integrated into the way that we work at El Centro de la Raza. So.
Yeah. For me, so much of it is grounding myself in kind of what we've been talking about here, you know, my grandmother, my mother, you know, my fathers, all the people that have poured into me, and let me know that what I'm doing is purposeful, it's impactful, it's meaningful, right? And hearing from so many different folks in community to charge me on kind of those like everyday kudos, like you're walking on the street and they're just like, yes, love what you're doing, you know, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna take that one in. And so I don't suffer it much, you know, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I think so much of that is the affirmations I have to give myself of, I'm here to do this work. I'm called to this work. I'm designed and destined for this work. And so I'm grateful for that. But anytime you start to go down a rabbit hole, you know, always having those anchors. And for me, it's that circle of influence. It goes back to that village. Yeah.
I'd like to add one thing. You know, Plaza Maestras, when we developed it, this is a $45 million project in 2016. I had like the city of Renton went to see them and they said, Estela, how did y'all do that? We don't even have the money to build housing like that. So one of a friend and a board member came to me afterwards and he said, you know, people doubted you. You know, they didn't think that you were going to have El Centro de la Raza survive. And I became the executive in 2009. You know, almost immediately, that was my project, you know, to build something on that 1 acre of land. And of course, it was a man that another man told my friend this, that he doesn't think that you're gonna be able to make it, and look what you've done, you know, in terms of building Plaza Maestras. Now, I want to say one thing. Obviously, I was the leadership and helping coordinate it, but I could not have done that work without the team at El Centro de la Raza, without the community support, without volunteers. I mean, it's truly, you know, the African proverb that it takes a village to do whatever we're doing to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. All good. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you to these amazing panelists, not just for being here today, but clearly for your dedication to this work. This is something that is felt by thousands and thousands of Washingtonians and beyond, because we're creating examples of how to do this work. Thank you for allowing me to moderate tonight. It was such an honor to be with you all. And thank y'all for joining.
So before we officially wrap up, we have one surprise because we do have a retirement happening. So just a little something for you to say thank you for everything that you've done for our community.
Oh, yes, she is. Thank you. Thank you.
I thought if we just clap long enough, you still stay. So that's what I was hoping a little bit. So thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute privilege to share the stage with these amazing women and share the space with you all today. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for showing up on this lovely evening. It's still sunny out there, so you can get a little bit of sun that's happening out there. If you have any other intimate gatherings that perhaps you'd like to attend, one way to find them is to go to solid-ground.org, where we list all of our social justice salons that we'll have scheduled for the rest of this year. You can also find the video eventually when we post it from this event, as well as previous events. So if there's a topic you see you weren't able to attend, check out the video. You can also hit the donate button and donate as well. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely evening.